All rise for Her Worshipful the Mayor and the Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Good evening. Good evening, and thank you very much for joining us for the extraordinary meeting that's been called on the electoral cycle. Could I please remind everybody to ensure your mobile devices are off? Please note the meeting is currently being webcast live. Just a reminder that members do need to stand when speaking in the chamber. I may also remind everyone that I intend to adhere strictly to the timing set out in Constitution. Thank you. Item 17, apologies for absence. Do you have any?
There are a number of apologies. Councillor Barry Barr, Councillor Anne Chadwick, Councillor David Cornish, Councillor Phil Cunnington, and Councillor John Kaiser.
Thank you. Are there any declarations of interest on matters? None? Thank you. I now have on 19 public question times. Do I have a public question? Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Your question, if you'd like to read it out, please.
In the calculations for the costs of running elections, the standard how much will it cost or save statement on the attached papers is 0 for years 1 to 3. Yet in Appendix A, there's a cost total of just over £4 million allocated to disruption. Please, could you help the public understand exactly how the 2.032 cost per year figure has been arrived at?
That's a question to Councillor Imogen Shepherd-Dupre. Thank you.
Okay, it's kind of sort of two questions, but the first one here is, I think you're referring to this table here. Yes. Because none of these things that we're talking about tonight are going to happen in the current financial year, the next financial year, or the following financial year. So how much will it cost to say? The answer is indeed 0 for those. But in answer to your question about how did we get to the 2.032 million, all I can say is that how did we get there? The number that was calculated was a tangible saving from 3 elections over a 4-year, was calculated as a tangible saving from 3 elections over a 4-year period versus every 4 years, every 4 years, which is £316,000. This equates to £79,000 per year. The figure includes such things as the cost of staffing and the facilities need to run events, including polling stations and printing costs. However, there is an estimate of a less tangible cost at £1 million per year. This is the approximate cost of the opportunity of moving forward of the council's overall business as a result of disruption caused by having annual elections. I am informed that the less tangible costs were made from a high-level estimate that was made in consultation with the council's corporate leadership team. It is an estimate of the impact on the council's business that is not moved forward as a result of the focus from being on elections in the month building up to them, including the period known as PERDA. And similarly, the focus of after the elections, where we are formulating and orientating the new administration of councillors. The figure should be taken in the context that it's only 0.2% of the council's annual size of business, and that it's only an opportunity cost. Therefore, it actually doesn't translate into real cash. We also need to respect that the council is not a commercial business, and lots of its functions are not done for financial gain. It is here to serve the needs of our residents and must remain fully accountable to the public that it serves. So therefore, we cannot accept financial savings as being the only motivator to change our current system. So for clarity, the amount per year of tangible combined with less tangible costs is just over 1 million, not the 2.032 million per year.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Do you have a supplementary? Thank you.
Thank you for providing the answer to my question on behalf of the council. You used the words estimate and not real, as well as tangible. So my question comes almost in two parts based on those two items. On the one hand, if it is real, then why didn't the council put in place an improvement programme to save that circa £1 million a year over the last 20 years under Conservative administrations? If, on the other hand, it is a mathematical inexactitude, then why is it, along with any other inexactitudes sent to members but not the public around 8:30 yesterday morning, why was it released for this debate under a Liberal Democrat led administration?
Sorry, your time's up.
Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Imogen Shepherd-Pray.
I'm assuming you're referring to the report that was sent to councillors and not publicly available. I'm afraid I'm not sure really I have an answer for that one, because I think you're referring to something that isn't in the public realm. Maybe that's the question. We can give you a written answer.
Thank you. We're now moving on to item 20, the main business. The electoral cycle is a 30-minute duration. Please note that in order for the recommendation to be agreed, it requires 2/3 of those members present at the meeting to vote in favour, and that's members in the chamber. Okay, thank you. Do I have a proposer? Councillor Jones. Is there a seconder? Thank you. Councillor Conway. Would the proposer like to speak for up to 3 minutes?
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Mayor. Tonight's meeting marks the end of the process of considering whether we wish to move from elections in thirds to all-out elections every 4 years. That process started before the May elections, and this new administration has inherited it. I therefore find myself in the unusual position of proposing a recommendation which I and my group will be voting against. There are good arguments on both sides of this debate. However, the Liberal Democrats believe that the fundamental point is that elections every 3 years out of 4 provides greater accountability of the council. As the report before you says, elections every year provides greater stability for the council in terms of its membership. Elections by thirds reduces the risk of wholesale changes within the council. This allows a wealth of knowledge to remain within the council. All-out elections could see 20, maybe 30 or more councillors lose their seats in one election, especially if the election coincided with a general election. We would see considerable experience disappearing from the council. The report also says that electing in thirds provides the electorate with a greater opportunity to be involved in decision-making at the council. This year, when the Conservatives were in control of the council, they proposed to make Woodlands Avenue in Woodley open to only one-way traffic. Quite rightly, there was considerable...
Excuse me, Mr. Jones, Councillor Jones, your point of order is?
That's factually incorrect. That was a consultation. It was not a proposal.
Sorry, what's your point of order?
Whatever point of order you use for factually incorrect points.
What is it?
I have to ask for it.
What is it? No. Okay, well, let's say that this year, when the Conservatives were in control...
Councillor Jones,
yeah, sorry.
Sorry, I need to answer Councillor Jordan. Sorry, if you can't name the point of order, I will just ignore it. Okay, thank you. Sorry about that, Mr. Councillor Jones. Will you continue?
Thank you very much. Quite rightly, there was considerable opposition to this proposal from residents. There is no doubt in my mind that when they realised that this was an unpopular policy, the Conservatives did a U-turn. This U-turn would never have happened if there hadn't been elections this year. Retaining elections every year requires all wards to be the same size with 3 members in each ward. This is fairer than some wards having 3 members, others having 2 members, and some having only 1 member. For many years, the Conservatives nationally favoured elections every 4 years. This is a system used by councils, county councils and town councils who have no choice but to use this system. Elections every 4 years tend to favour the larger parties and disadvantage smaller parties, and especially the independents. Elections are a good thing. They allow residents, our electorate...
Sorry, Mr. Councillor Jones, I'm sorry we're out of time.
How could I got interrupted?
Sorry about that, but... Okay. Is there anybody else wish to speak against the report?
Excuse me, Madam Mayor, just to help you. Sorry, you don't just have to speak against the report, we can also speak in favour of it.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Sorry, I need to find out if anybody needs to speak against it. If nobody speaks against it, then we go straight to the vote.
Somebody has spoken against it. Clive just did.
Yeah. Excuse me. Sorry, I'm correct. Thank you. Yes. Yeah. And Clive was speaking as the Councillor Jones was speaking as the proposer.
You're correct.
Yeah. Sorry, can we just continue? I'd like to see a show of hands who would like to speak, please. Councillor Croy, would you like to start speaking, please?
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor, and congratulations on your election. Unaccustomed as I am to disagreeing with Clive Jones, I am going to disagree with him on this occasion. I appreciate the difficult position he's been put in proposing this report. The idea of going to all-out elections would do a great disservice to our residents. As Clive has rightly pointed out, the proposals, the consultation, whatever you want to call it, that was put out to my residents in Woodley by you, Councillor Jorgensen, and your team was exactly the sort of thing that means that we need to stick to election by thirds to keep the council and its officers accountable to residents. If we move to all-out elections, we will have periods of 3 years at a time where the council can do whatever it wants. The movement to, or rather the change from small wards to large wards is also very, very important. We have some members in here who are sitting here with just 4 or 5 or 600 votes behind them on the ballot paper. We have others we're sitting here with 1,900 or 1,800 votes. We cannot go on having that disparity in terms of the democratic weight of individual votes. There's other people who want to speak, so I will leave it there. I'll be voting against the recommendation.
Thank you. Can I have Councillor Baker, please?
Thank you. Very quickly, it was Woodley Conservatives actually that caused the one-way system to be removed. But anyway, I'm probably going to be excommunicated after my speech, but I really feel very passionate on this subject. We're here to decide what our future election cycle will be. Officers are recommending moving to all-out elections every 4 years. The proposal appear to be centred around a few key points, which I'll try and address in my speech. The consultation results are highlighted in this report. Let's look at the responses, 3,067. That represents 1.8% of the total population of the borough. This is tiny. Even if you think the responses are sufficient, the final result was very close. 1,656 for yes, and 1,411 for no. So there were 245 more responses received for yes than no. In other words, those 245 residents are having undue influence. A highly subjective way of looking at the responses is to count the number of comments made on them. There were 734 comments on no, and over half, 444 comments on yes. So you could conclude that the no voters were more passionate in replying rather than just simply ticking a box. Therefore, I think the complete consultation result should be ignored. There's a lot of emphasis from officers on saving money, but only 200 out of those responses mentioned it. It's perfectly understandable that officers would favour a low-cost option. But we're not talking about letting a contract and provide a service. We're talking about democracy here. If we start shaping democracy on the basis of cost, then we're on a dangerous path to damage something that is at the very core of our society. I strongly believe cost should not be an influencer on how we run our democracy. Much is made of that we are one of only 16 councils who still operate on thirds. My response is simple. Who cares what other councils do? We must decide on what is best for our residents and not simply copy what others do. Many respondents highlighted that thirds allow the administration to be scrutinised and challenged on a yearly basis, whereas all outs, you can only do that every 4 years. This means that the administration can make some serious mistakes year after year, and residents have no ability to influence their behaviour. It's a sort of a concept that we only have democracy once every 4 years. I personally think that all outs weaken the democratic process significantly. There's a lot more I can say, but I'm sure my night's going to come up soon. But for these reasons, I absolutely cannot support the officer's recommendations at all.
Okay, can I have Councillor Prue-Bray next, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. When we debated the consultation on the electoral cycle at the council meeting in March, the then opposition parties pointed out that it was flawed. And I've been through the submitted responses, and it seems our concerns were justified. And here are a couple of illustrative examples. People realised they could reply more than once. We don't know how many did, but it was at least one, as there are two near identical comments in favour of moving to 4 yearly elections, which can only have come from a single Conservative former councillor. A fair few comments echo our concern that the consultation led people to reply yes. Some people answered yes when they meant no. How do I know that? Because the comments from the responses are grouped by yes and no, and some comments under yes clearly show a preference for elections by thirds. There were also some misconceptions against those preferring 4 yearly elections. Some said it would boost turnout, but in fact, local election turnout is very similar between areas of the country which already have 4 yearly elections and areas which have elections by thirds. Some people thought that because the leaflet said things could not stay the same, we could not continue with the current system. And some people seemed confused about which system we currently have. Others thought that if we moved to all-out elections, it would mean that we could keep the same wards as we have now. But years of housing development have led to unequal representation, so that all the boundaries will have to change, whatever frequency of elections we use. And alongside all that, there were some very compelling points made by those in favour of election by thirds. I only have time, I think, to quote 3. A badly performing council can do a lot of damage in 4 years. Elections every 4 years means that councillors can ignore the electorate in the meantime. And an all-out system overly benefits wealthier and better supported parties. Independent candidates would be drowned out. The word accountability is mentioned over and over again, over 80 times, I believe. This consultation was held before the May elections. As a result of those elections, a Lib Dem-led partnership is now running the council. We might well love the certainty of knowing that we had 4 years in charge, but we are not here to hoard power for ourselves. We are here to serve residents. The best way to ensure that we stay in touch with them and with their concerns is to continue with elections by thirds, and therefore that is what I will be voting for.
Councillor Murray, please.
To quote Keith Baker, we're here talking about democracy. The voice of the people is the voice of God. The residents of Wokingham have spoken, and they've told us they want us to move to all-out elections. We already have all-out elections for our town councils. Early Town Council, which is led by Councillor Clive Jones, Wokingham Town Council, which is led by Imogen Shepherd-Dubé. I'm going to assume that if they're voting for thirds, they're going to be voting to change.
Sorry, excuse me, have you got a point of order? Okay.
It's in fact led by me rather than Councillor Clive Jones.
I apologise.
Thank you. One at a time.
When it comes to this consultation, all residents were written to, all residents were given the opportunity to have their voice. 3,000 people have given their voice. Now, Councillor Baker has suggested that it's a small number, but actually, if you look at the statistics of it, it gives a 99% certainty within plus or minus 2.3% that would have been the outcome if every single person in our community had responded. It is a statistically robust sample. The only thing to say here is the voice of the people is the voice of God.
Sorry. Yeah, sorry. Can you? Sorry. Sorry, Councillor Baker, if you could.
Point.
Significantly lower, and he pointed out to me quite recently that is statistically significant. But a house doesn't vote. Individuals do.
Thank you. Continue, Councillor Murray.
Individuals do vote. Keith, you're absolutely right. And the individuals that voted in this consultation have voted to say they want elections to be all out. To ignore them would be democratically irresponsible for us. This is about democracy. The voice of the people is the voice of God, and the people of Wokingham have spoken. They want all-out elections. To vote against that is undemocratic.
Thank you. Councillor Gary Cowan, please.
Oh, thank you, Madam Mayor, and please hold the front pages, everybody. I agree 100% with Councillor Baker. Go there. Get on with that. In England, 36 unitary authorities elected the whole council basis and 16 elect by thirds. This doesn't make the 16 wrong. On whole council elections, report states that there is limited research and some of it goes back 19 years. 19-year-old data is well past its sell-by date and should certainly be ignored. And to add insult to injury, the report refers to Mori, and it implies there is a confusion amongst younger voters of those of black minority ethnic groups, which suggests there are equality issues to consider, considering an appropriate electoral system. What an insult to young black and minority ethnic groups, because they know when it's time to vote and they vote. The report covers elections by thirds in some detail, which makes a good case to retain the present system. And elections every year provide much more opportunity to scrutinise the administration than a 4-yearly cycle. As for retaining elections by thirds, the report implies they will require all wards to be 3-member wards. I can't see the reason behind that, but that is not a matter for this evening's vote. The use of cost saving as a reason to change the democratic process is the thin end of the wedge. It is guided by a consultation where only 3,067 residents responded, and the result was 54 for and 46%. That number of residents in a borough of 171,000 odd people is not exactly a landslide. It's quite the opposite. Like the first signs of spring, our residents know when it's election time. It's when most years the letterboxes are stuffed with leaflets and people never seen before wearing blue rosettes come knocking on the door saying how much they're going to change the world. How appealing it must be for them if spring only comes once every 4 years. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Halsall, please.
Good evening. Would you like your council to be national party dominated or be dominated by local champions? We are a representative democracy exercising a system of first past both. We have been given limited but important choices. We do know we cannot continue to enjoy that which we have. The number of voters in the borough, about 130,000, which is approximately 2,500 per ward member, which is approximately 1,800 dwellings, inflated for 5 years. It is reasonable that a ward member should be able to get to know and be known by 2,500 people in 1,800 dwellings. If he or she is doing their job, they should make it their business to get to know and to be known. It is not possible that a ward member will be able to get to know or be known by 7,500 people in 5,400 dwellings, unless they are a local personality. In the main, your electoral prospects in a large ward are determined by the current view of the National Party. Your motivation for being a councillor is varied. There are those who believe they want to be MPs or fervently believe in their party ideology. Not many, but there are. There are those, sadly, there are those who feel that they have a score to settle. There are those who are here because they find the money a little attractive. But in the main, we are here to make life better for the community in which we live. Those communities are relatively small. Even in a town, the natural community is no more than 1,800 dwellings. But we're only here to represent and serve our residents. We are not here as advocates or representatives of our national parties. If the administration is doing its duty, it will actively oppose its national party's policy if it's in the view contrary to the interests of Woking Borough and its residents. At least that's what I did in spades. We need the chamber to be full of local champions, not party representatives. We have an opportunity to ensure that it is not only a move to a more democratic borough, but also to save a huge amount of money. This should not be a whipped vote. It should be a free vote. Tonight, you should vote for all outs and subsequently for one councillor wards. That would be in the overwhelming interests of the residents and would remove national party politics for Woking Borough Council forever. Thank you.
Councillor Burgess, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. A move to all-out elections every 4 years would represent an erosion of local democracy. Elections every 4 years makes councillors, and in particular the ruling party, more out of touch. It allows councillors and political groups to do what they wish for 3.5 years before finally talking to residents in the run-up to an election. 4-year cycles also allow the ruling party to make unpopular decisions without any electoral accountability for years to come. And under this system, if residents feel that the councillors in their ward are not doing a good job, there's nothing they can do about it for 4 long years. By contrast, elections 3 out of every 4 years keeps political groups regularly accountable to the electorate. As we've heard, the wording of the taxpayer-funded leaflet and the consultation was concerning and flawed. First, it suggested that the electoral cycle is the main issue of the Boundary Commission review, but we know the real crux of this lies in the redrawing of the ward boundaries, and the question of electoral cycle just falls out of that. Second, the wording of the main question was biased in favour of elections every 4 years. The question posed was, would you prefer to vote for your local councillor once every 4 years or every 3 years out of 4? An alternative way to phrase that would be, would you prefer the council listen to you all the time or once every 4 years? Third, the leaflet used different language to describe the two options, with the all-out elections being described very directly, while the alternative option included caveats such as the benefits, quote, have been stated as, a phrase that also appears in the paper we have tonight. And this bias would lead the reader to believe the arguments are not factual, but merely speculation. Fourth, there was no security on the online survey. You could complete it as many times as you like. And as we've heard, if you look at the detail, you can see at least one person who has done this. And finally, while people with access to the internet could vote as many times as they wanted, people without access to the internet were not easily able to take part. So the consultation was, unfortunately, rendered meaningless as a true measure of opinion. And I agree with Councillor Baker totally on that point. The idea that this is the voice of God is frankly bizarre. As for the cost implications, clearly having fewer elections would be cheaper, but we cannot support a lack of proper scrutiny of any councillors or political group. Therefore, it is vital that we retain elections 3 out of 4 years to keep us as councillors fully accountable to our electorate.
Councillor Jorgensen, please. Paula.
Hang on.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, Madam Mayor, to interrupt you. Time is getting on. We've got a number of speakers still to come. So under Standing Order 4212N, I'd like to propose that the time limit set by 4221 be extended by 30 minutes to allow everybody a chance to speak.
And Councillor Conway seconds it. Can we have a show of hands to vote to extend it half an hour, please? Carried. Thank you. We will continue. Sorry, Councillor, you're calling.
Thank you very much. I'm going to surprise everybody as well by saying in my first sentence that I agree with Councillor Jones. The issue is extremely finely balanced with arguments on both sides. I like single-member wards. I also like thirds. You can't have both. So how members vote will stand for whether the council that represents our residents and their choices, or whether it is a council that holds local people in contempt. There is a fundamental principle at stake here. The council, before making a decision on its election system for years to come, invited the electorate to say what they wanted. Members on both sides expressed support for the idea of consultation. Residents expressed their view in favour of all-out elections in one of the best response rates for a consultation the council has ever had. It is therefore our responsibility to implement what our residents want. I know some members expressed a view that somehow the information in the consultation wasn't balanced. Given that the wording was prepared by our impartial monitoring officer, who is here to uphold the highest democratic standards, I'm afraid that simply won't wash. What this amounts to is a complaint that the information wasn't weighted in favour of their preferred option. Different members on both sides have expressed a preference for both systems. The administration has made it perfectly clear that they don't want all-out elections. In fact, they campaigned on the streets against them, I believe. They're entitled to their view. And they did the right thing by setting out their arguments to the residents in favour of election by thirds. But they didn't convince the electorate. It isn't acceptable for members to ignore the outcome of a consultation because they don't like the result. I hope that members will join me tonight in voting for the recommendation to implement all-out elections, as our residents have instructed us to do. Abstaining is not good enough. Those who abstain know full well they're preventing the council from reaching the two-thirds majority it needs to adopt all-out elections. Abstaining is effectively voting against the people's wishes.
Councillor Hellier-Simon, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. First of all, I would like to apologise for my rather ghoulish appearance tonight. I an eye operation 2 days ago, and it's left my eyes rather bruised, so forgive that. With respect to Councillor Burgess, does she really think that we only go to the doorstep and only listen to people and talk to them and keep in touch with them just before elections? Because that's certainly not the case for Conservative councillors. We keep in touch with them all through the year, talking to them and listening to them. However, what I want to talk about are just two things, because you'll have heard many arguments from other people. I've long been in favour of four-yearly elections, and that's not a political stance. It's for logical reasons. And I'm just going to focus on two at the moment. One, a general one, and one, a very local one. The general one is, of course, finance. We will save £4.5 million, not just once, but £4.5 million every 4 years. And that's a sum that's been arrived at by our very, very experienced Director of Finance. What could we do with £4.5 million every 4 years? Councillor Shepherd-Dubé talked about serving the residents' needs. Well, I know many residents' needs that could well be served by that £4.5 million every 4 years, and they would be well pleased by it. And I think it's quite irresponsible to throw away £4.5 million of taxpayers' money for no real purpose. The second reason is a very, very local one, and forgive me for this, but because I think we're the only ward where this happens. But whenever there's an election, we have to close 3 schools. They're all on the same site, and because of the school's attitude to safeguarding, they close the whole site. And this happens every year. The schools are fed up with it, the governors are fed up with it, the parents are fed up with it. The parents either have to take an unpaid day off work to look after their children, or they have to pay a childminder, or they just take the children to work. I don't know what solutions they have, but we get an awful lot of feedback from our parents to say, please, can we have an election only every 4 years so that the school does not have to close for a whole day every year? And so those are the two reasons I want to put forward this evening, and that's why I shall certainly be voting in favour of the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Conway, would you like to speak?
Yes, I had reserved my right. I'm happy to speak now. Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. For the Conservatives to pose as champions of democracy seems odd when they want to have fewer elections. I want to start, though, with a point that I hope we can all agree on. Consultations do not confer the same democratic mandate as elections. In May's local elections, turnout averaged more than 40%. The number of residents who responded to the consultation represents just 2.3% of the registered electorate, and still smaller proportion, as Keith said, of those able to participate in the consultation. The value of consultations, as planning committee members will testify, is qualitative, not quantitative. Free-form comments in consultations help councillors to make a rounded and informed judgment. In this case, there was a wide range of views expressed, but two stood out: those that emphasised expense and those that emphasised accountability. On the question of expense, Pauline, you might like to note, most of the costs of the current system identified by the Chief Financial Officer are, as he explains, intangible. They mainly represent staff time and would not constitute a cash saving if the system were changed. On the more tangible costs, a bit of context might be helpful. The medium-term financial plan, well thumbed. Page 36 shows the council's gross expenditure is £337 million in 2022-23. Page 93 shows capital expenditure of £124 million for the same year. So a total turnover or size of business of £461 million. The £316,000 estimated by the Chief financial officer as a tangible saving. That's the real saving, Pauline, not 4 million. Between 2024 and 2027, therefore represents an annual saving of £79,000, or just naught.
Point of personal explanation. That 4.5 million, as you say, a lot of it is intangible, but while we're paying officers to work, they could be doing work on behalf of the residents, not just in preparation for an election.
I'll leave aside the fact that's not a personal explanation, but anyway, if I can go back to the point, the £79,000 annual saving represents just 0.017% of the council's current annual turnover. In the end, how one looks at this matter depends on the value you put on accountability. In my view, the council's accountability to the electorate should carry more weight than any other arguments. It should be a transcending principle that defines what a council is all about. If we're here to serve our residents, we must be accountable to them. The current system of elections every 3 years out of 4 provides much greater accountability than a system in which elections take place only once every 4 years.
Councillor Conway,
That is why I'll be voting against the recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Jones, would you like a right to reply?
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Mayor. In my speech earlier, I spoke in favour of elections by thirds. I spoke of the need for accountability. Elections by thirds reduces the risks of seeing a considerable wealth of knowledge leaving the council all at the same time. Elections by thirds gives the electorate a greater chance to have an effective voice and be involved in decision making. It means all wards have the same representation of 3 members, much fairer than some wards having 1 member, some having 2, some having 3. Elections every 4 years favour the big parties and disadvantage smaller parties and the independents. I had intended to say it earlier, but didn't quite get there. Cost savings, which can be properly quantified, are very important, especially when the council faces serious budget issues, as we do in Wokingham. But the accountability that comes with elections by thirds has to be paramount. There are 3 things that are very important and should be considered by all councillors, officers and residents, and should be paramount in our decision making tonight. Those 3 things are accountability, accountability, accountability. Madam Mayor, I urge all councillors to vote against this recommendation.
May we have a recorded vote, Madam Mayor?
Do you have 6 people?
I think we have quite a few more than that, I think.
Thank you. Then we'll go to recorded vote, please. Thank you.
So you're voting for or against the recommendation. Councillor Sam Akhtar.
For.
Councillor Keith Baker.
Against.
Councillor Rachel Bishop-Firth.
Against.
Councillor Laura Blumenthal.
For.
Councillor Chris Bowring.
For.
Councillor Shirley Boyt.
Against.
Councillor Prue Bray.
Against.
Councillor Rachel Burgess.
Against.
Councillor Stephen Conway.
Against.
Councillor Gary Cowan.
Against.
Councillor Andy Croy.
Against.
Councillor David Davis.
For.
Councillor Peter Dennis.
Against.
Councillor Lindsay Ferris.
Against.
Councillor Michael Firminger.
For.
Councillor Paul Fishwick,
Against.
Councillor Jim Pruin,
Against.
Councillor Maria G,
Against.
Councillor John Halsall,
For.
Councillor David Hare, Councillor Peter Harper,
For.
Councillor Pauline Hallier-Simons,
For.
Councillor Graham Howe,
For.
Councillor Chris Johnson,
Against.
Councillor Clive Jones,
Against.
Councillor Norman Jorgensen,
For.
Councillor Pauline Jorgensen,
For.
Councillor Sarah Kerr,
Against.
Councillor Abdul Loys,
For.
Councillor Tahir Maher,
Against.
Councillor Morag Malvern,
Against.
Councillor Charles McGetts,
For.
Councillor Rebecca McGetts,
For.
Councillor Adrian Mather,
Against.
Councillor Andrew Mickleby,
Against.
Councillor Stuart Monroe,
For.
Councillor Gregor Murray,
For.
Councillor Alistair Neil,
Against.
For.
Councillor Beth Rowland,
Against.
Councillor Ian Shenton,
Against.
Councillor Imogen Shepherd Debay,
Against.
Councillor Rochelle Shepherd Debay,
Against.
Councillor Caroline Smith,
Against.
Councillor Mike Smith,
Against.
Councillor Wayne Smith,
For.
Councillor Bill Soane,
For.
Councillor Alison Swaddle,
For.
Councillor Shahid Yunus.
For.
Thank you.
Thank you. The recommendation falls. Thank you. And thank you, everybody, for your time. Thank you. Meeting closed. Thank you very much. And the meeting is now closed. Thank you and good night. Thank you very much.